All right. So tell me what's going on.
So January is Stalking Awareness Month. So we
Okay.
wanted to come in and talk about stalking with you. Ion Center serves victims of intimate partner violence and sexual assault, but we also serve victims of stalking, and that doesn't get talked about as much.
Okay.
So we wanted to come and say, hey, if you feel like you may or may not be experiencing it, support is always there.
Right.
And I think when we look at stalking, it might not look as as impactful or severe as other forms of violence, but it is a form of violence. People's lives are impacted, interrupted. It's multiple happenings. It's not like a one and done. Not to be too nerdy. If you look at the definition, it's a pattern of behaviors that would cause a reasonable person to feel afraid.
Okay.
So, 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men experiencing stalking in their lifetime, which for me feels kind of crazy because that's kind of comparable to intimate partner violence and sexual violence, but it's not talked about as much.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
I do think we're starting to talk about it more with like You came out a few years ago, Baby Reindeer. So it's happening more in pop culture, but I think it's easy to dismiss.
Yeah. So how long have you all had this, or how long is this awareness, this month, kind of, how long has this been a thing as far as bringing awareness to it?
Oh, goodness. I've been in the work for 12 years, so definitely been all 12 years.
Okay. So something you've been working at, though, is a point on that.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. And so I guess what are some ways you all are bringing attention to it?
Yeah.
Utilizing social media is a great way to bring attention to stalking. A lot of times, like Stacey mentioned, it can be hard to realize you're even in a situation. Most people don't even realize they are a victim of stalking until it's like right in front of their face. So really talking about how media has portrayed stalking in the past versus now. And a great example, like Baby Reindeer and You being released, have started to show like the dangerous sides of stalking, that it can start with just being nice, offering someone a compliment, a drink on the house, a friend to listen to after a bad day, and then those things snowball and spiral really quickly. But also looking at how it's been perceived in the past. And a really common movie that people know, just about everyone I've met has seen the movie The Notebook. But what people don't talk about is the letters that were happening and being sent every single day and like over this like long period of time. Like if you're not wanting those letters to be sent, that's stalking, it's harassment. So kind of reframing what stalking actually is, and not glorifying these things as huge professions of love, and actually looking at it for exactly what it is, which could be harassment, could be stalking, depending on what people are accepting on their side. And then, is there anything else you wanted to add around?
No, I think that was great.
Yeah.
Well, and then I imagine there's always a concern of escalation, right? So it doesn't just stop.
Yeah.
Stop with that. It always
escalates. Yeah, absolutely. It's very similar to intimate partner violence, where it starts small and then escalates. I used to know the stats around it. I'm not as good anymore. But there are numbers where people experience stalking their entire life. It never ends, and it just becomes part of their normal, unfortunately. One thing I think is really cool, so when I started, there was actually not any like legal protection, really. When you would file for a protective order, stalking wouldn't classify under it.
Okay.
But a couple years into being an advocate, Kentucky actually rolled out a new protective order specifically for stalking, dating violence, and sexual violence. That was not there previously because they had recognized like there is this need and this protection, and there's a whole population of people who need this support that aren't eligible for it. So I think that's pretty cool. Even as recent as in the past 10 years, we've seen that change. Yeah.
So what are some ways when you mentioned support, what are some ways people were being stalked or supported?
Yeah. So definitely reach out to like the Ion Center if you feel like you're being stalked and want to figure out like, how do I navigate this? Am I being stalked? What does this look like? But also we encourage like mixing up your routines. So if you take the same way to work, leave at the same time, how do you mix that up? Lean on your support system. So like ask somebody to walk you to your car.
Absolutely.
Like, yeah. A lot of it is around, a big sign of stalking is like unwanted gifts or a lot of text messages and phone calls. So blocking the number getting a new phone number, which, I mean, that can be a burden, but that's one way to protect yourself. Blocking on social media. You get, sometimes when we see that, they'll make like more and more profiles, but just keep blocking it, which again, that is a burden, but it is a way to keep yourself safe.
Right.
One thing we'll see is that people who are stalking will actually go to people around that person to try to get information, like about that person. So letting the people around you know, like, this is going on. Please don't answer any questions about me. Like, so getting the people around you to help keep you safe too.
Yeah.
I think it's also really important to document things. If you're worried that you're being stalked or someone you love is being stalked, keeping proof of different things that kind of set you off is a great way to start to, with the justice system and the legal side of things, it never hurts to have extra backup behind you. Your voice is really powerful, but having physical proof just really amplifies that. And like Stacey said, like keeping the people around you in the know too, so if something's brought to them, those people know to keep track of what's happening as well.
Our number one thing when we're working with victims who are experiencing stalking is to create a stalking log. Because if you go back to that definition, you want to establish that there's a pattern. So it's this date I got 16 text messages at this time in a row in this span to show like that harassment level. Or another big sign of stalking is like unwanted gifts. And so we really want to talk about like what's the impact and the context of this act. And so you might say, had 24 roses delivered to my work from this person, which might sound like a nice thing. Like, who wouldn't love 24 roses at work? But when you put the context of, I've asked 13 times for them to stop reaching out to me. Please don't see me at work. Like, I tried to end this relationship 3 months ago and I'm still getting it. Like, that context matters.
Right.
So that stalking log is really able to show that pattern and like the escalation and the impact on the person, if that makes sense.
I would assume if you feel that way, you're probably right. I mean, it's because why would you? I mean, there's something that maybe subconsciously you're being tipped to, or your body's picking up on it. Yeah. And if nothing else, like you're saying, having the documentation is a really good way to look at it, and I guess balance it if you need. I mean, once you see it written down, it does kind of have a different draw. Like, oh, there's 48 entries here. This is.
Right.
Yes.
This is an issue.
I think, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think it's important to remember, too, just about with anything, anyone can be subject to stalking. There isn't, like, a requirement of something you've had to have done before to be a victim of stalking.
Right.
Just as anyone can be subject to violence, anyone can be subject to stalking. And I think getting past that mental block of, oh, it's not happening to me, is important. Because if you feel uncomfortable, always trust your gut. Ideally, no one's going through it, but we know that's not always the case. So trusting your gut is like the first most important tool you can use if you're not sure.
And I think too, like painting that picture you talked about, I think we often like minimize what's happening, or like, I don't know about you all, it's always like go, 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 that I forget what happened like 2 weeks ago. That when you like, you're like, oh yeah, that did happen, and that happened, and that happened. Oh, and that happened too. Yeah. Oh, I forgot about this piece. Like that it helps keep that catalog. And especially because stalking it's not new, but pressing charges around stalking specifically is new. And so having that stalking log and documentation and really painting that picture really helps that case for pressing like those charges if you go that route. So one thing I think that is interesting to talk about with stalking is that it can happen as a standalone form of violence, where you were talking about, you might feel paranoid, like am I getting stalked? Who would be interested in me? So there might be like that doubt or or maybe even paranoia, but it could also happen within like the context of as a component of intimate partner violence, where it's the stalking's happening alongside this other form of violence, which I think looks very differently when you know the person or don't know the person, and that impacts like, do I ask for protection? Do I not? Do I go to the police? Do I not? How do I keep myself safe? Like, there's a lot of moving pieces there that make it complicated.
Well, and I'd imagine too, and kind of like you were all talking about, is that you don't think you have a reason to interact with you all.
Yeah.
Like that's, what you all do is helping people who've got quote unquote real problems. And you're like, well, you're in the middle of it.
Yeah.
And that's the situation. Okay.
Yeah.
So,
and because I think too, like with stalking, it's such an easy form of violence to minimize. I mean, like, I know I'm guilty of making the joke, like, oh, I'm going to go stalk them on Facebook.
right.
You know? Like, and that, like, yeah, there's a lighthearted, like, yeah, I'm going to go creep on their pictures.
It's beyond curious.
Yes, there's always a line where, and it goes back to that definition of make a reasonable person feel afraid. Like,
Right.
I've now follow you on Facebook, and I like every picture you post within seconds of you posting it, and comments on everything, and you get multiple comments to a point where it crosses that line.
Yeah.
You know,
It's too much.